Hi guys, in this video we're going to look at the 3 different ways to pronounce ed at the end of verbs and adjectives. I'm talking about words like needed, arrived, and watched. I know this is something that lots of students find difficult, but thankfully there are some very helpful rules. And those are what we are going to look at in this video. I'm also going to show you a trick which can help you if you physically find it difficult to say words like arrived or watched. And keep watching till the end because I'm going to show you some exceptions to the rules as well. Don't forget to turn on the subtitles if you need them, and if you'd like to sign up for my free Advanced English email lessons, you'll find the link in the description. Let's get started. We're first going to look at verbs whose base form end in a d sound or a t sound. These are verbs like need, decide, wait, and create. You might have noticed that I didn't say verbs that end in D or T. That's because what's important is the final sound, not the final letter. For example, decide ends in an E, but the final sound is a D. Similarly, create ends in an E, but the final sound is a T. The rule here is very simple. If you add an ED or a D to these words, you pronounce the final syllable as id. For example, need becomes needed. Decide becomes decided. Wait, waited. Create, created. This makes sense because if you didn't have that I between the final 2 consonants, you'd be saying something like needs or waits. I think most people would agree that that doesn't sound very natural in English. I should also point out here that lots of native speakers actually pronounce that I as a schwa. So instead of saying needed, they'll say needed. Lots of North Americans and Australians do that. I normally say it that way, for example. Don't worry too much about that because both versions are fine. I'm just pointing it out because students sometimes get confused when they hear people saying things in a slightly different way. Let's see some more examples of verbs that end in d. Try to repeat them after me. Grade, graded. Land, landed. Add, added. Pretend, pretended. Now some examples of verbs that end in t. Again, try to repeat them after me. Taste, tasted. Heat, heated. Visit, visited. Shout, shouted. Another small pronunciation point. In American English, if you add an ed to a word that ends in t, that t becomes a flap T, which is a d sound. This often happens when there's a t in the middle of a word, like later. In British English, it's later. In American English, it's later. So the standard American pronunciation of these words is tasted, heated, visited, shouted. We're now going to look at when ed is pronounced d. This is similar to the previous ending, but there's no I or a. This is for verbs that end in vowel sounds and voiced consonants, apart from d. What's a voiced consonant? Well, basically it's when there's vibration in your voice box. If you put your hand on your throat, you can feel it. For example, d is a voiced consonant. D. D. Another voiced consonant is b. B. A verb that ends in b is grab. This becomes grabbed. It's not grabbed. It's grabbed. So just think, if the ending of the base form is voiced, the ed is pronounced d. Voiced goes with voiced. Let's see some other voiced consonants and examples. J. Manage. This becomes managed. It's not managed. It's managed. G. Hug. Hugged. V. Arrive. Arrived. V. Breathe. Breathed. Z. Sneeze. Sneezed. Dream. Dreamed. Clean. Cleaned. Bang. Banged. Pull. Pulled. We also use d for verbs that end in vowel sounds. For example, play. With ed, this is played. Here are a couple more examples. Lie. Lied. Enjoy. Enjoyed. Another voiced consonant that I didn't mention before is r. Let's see what happens in British and American English. In American English, this word is pronounced cover. Cover. There's a r at the end. If you add ed, it's covered. Covered. In British English, it's cover. Cover. The letter R is not pronounced. There's a vowel sound at the end. If you add ed, this becomes covered. Covered. So the ending is the same in American and British English. If there's a r or a vowel sound, the ed is pronounced d. Now we're going to look at when the ed is pronounced t. This rule is very simple. it's pronounced t after verbs that end in an unvoiced consonant. That is not t. An unvoiced consonant is one where there's no vibration here. T, for example, is an unvoiced consonant. T. T. So if the ending of a verb is unvoiced, the ed is pronounced t, which is also unvoiced. Unvoiced goes with unvoiced. Let's see some examples. P. Help. This becomes helped. It's not helped or helpet. It's helped. Ch. Watch. Watched. K. Like. Liked. F. Laugh. Laughed. S. Dance. Danced. Sh. Wish. Wished. Now here are a couple of useful tips. Number 1. The most important of these 3 rules is really the first one. In other words, you pronounce ed as id or ed if the verb ends in d or t, like in needed and waited. When it comes to the other 2 rules, the truth is, if you mix them up, it doesn't really matter. Yes, if you want to speak very correct English with perfect pronunciation, it's something that you should pay attention to, but in reality, most people probably won't notice. For example, if you say arrived instead of arrived, a lot of people will not notice, especially if it's in the middle of a sentence, such as this one. If you say it correctly, it's I arrived at 3 o'clock. If you say it incorrectly, it's I arrived at 3 o'clock. There's not much difference. People will hear a difference, however, if you say arrived. I arrived at 3 o'clock. So make sure you only add an I or an a if the verb ends in a d or a t. That's honestly the most important rule. Now, some of you might be thinking, but I find it physically difficult to say arrived or watched. I always say arrived or watched. That brings us to my second tip. If you find it hard to say arrived, try saying arrive do. Then say it a bit faster. Arrive do, arrive do. Then try to say it without the oo sound. Arrived, arrived. You can try this with any word where the ed is pronounced d. If the last sound is a t, like in watched, try to say watch to. Again, try saying it faster. Watch to, watch to. Then try to say it without the oo sound. Watched, watched. As I said at the beginning, there are some exceptions to these rules. These concern some adjectives that have an ed ending. I know I've just been talking about verbs in this video, but if an adjective ends in ed, most of the time the same rules apply. For example, disappointed, bored, astonished. But there are some exceptions. Don't worry, there aren't many. Here are some that you might know already. If you followed the rules, you would pronounce this word naked. But as I'm sure you probably know, it's actually naked. Naked. This word isn't sacred or sacred, it's sacred. Sacred. And this one isn't wicked, it's wicked. Wicked. There are also a couple of words whose meanings change depending on the pronunciation. This word, for example, can be pronounced two different ways. When it's pronounced aged, it means of the age of. For example, Mike's children are aged 3 and 5. That means that Mike has one child who is 3 years old and one child who is 5 years old. But it can also be pronounced aged. Aged. Aged is a formal way of saying very old. For example, my aged grandparents are still able to live independently. I'll put a few more examples in the description. That's it for today, guys. I hope you learnt something. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and to hit the little bell if you don't want to miss any new videos. See you next time. Here, read them. And this often was both versions. The words like arrived, voiced consonants,